I had handled a Kimber K6S when one first arrived at my local gun club and range some time ago. The K6S had some features that I really liked. It was double action only, with no protruding hammer spur to catch on clothing. It had tritium night sights front and rear, recessed cylinder chambers, brushed stainless steel finish, excellent fitting rubber grips, an unfluted cylinder, and most of all, 6 shots were available, as compared to most snubby revolvers of this size that have a 5-shot capacity. As my usual, I had to ponder on this for a bit, but finally decided to acquire one, shoot it, and here's my evaluation of it. The frame and barrel are forged stainless steel, and it is nicely forged stainless steel. The K6S is one of the nicest finished revolvers that I have seen in a long time. All edges are beveled to provide the smoothest profile as possible. The trigger face is rounded. The right side plate is held in place by an Allen screw, and the seam is so well finished that you won't notice it unless you are looking closely at it. The cylinder is locked into place solidly at the front and rear when the cylinder is closed, and it is definitely locked up. Pull the trigger all the way to the rear and hold it, then try to move the cylinder, and you will feel no perceptible play. Kimber may have borrowed a few things from Ruger, which makes this revolver almost as robust as the Ruger SP101. One of those items is the cylinder latch. Unlike Colt, which you have to pull to the rear, or Smith & Wesson, which you have to push to the front, the K6S incorporates a press-in cylinder release, much like the Ruger double-action revolvers. The cylinder latch button incorporates a checkerboard pattern that assures positive engagement. Something that I really like is the trigger. The reason is that it is as close to a Ruger double-action revolver trigger that can be found. Kimber claims that the trigger is a non-stacking trigger. Stacking is where the resistance of the trigger increases through the pull. Some triggers have a noticeable step in their resistance, but with others, the increase is more gradual. In either case, this should occur consistently, both in the amount of resistance and where it is encountered in the trigger pull. Stacking and staging are not the same, and the two terms are often confused. Stacking refers to the amount of resistance felt throughout the trigger pull. In short, a trigger where the resistance is the same throughout its travel is a non-stacking trigger. However, that trigger pull reaches a point where the stacking decreases. The advertised double-action only trigger pull weight, incidentally, is between 9.5 pounds and 10.5 pounds. The trigger pull weight on my K6S is pretty close to the middle, and I expect it to lessen as the revolver breaks in. There is absolutely no grit to this trigger moving rearward, and fast shots are just as smooth as slow shots. On the return trigger stroke, it feels like it is gritty, but it is not. It is simply everything internal resetting. Staging a trigger entails you grabbing the revolver in a standard firing mode, but you work your trigger really quick to the rear, and that will index the cylinder fully and will cock the hammer about 3/4 of the way, and with the last of the trigger pull. This could be referred to as a slack point, but most refer to it as the staging point. At this staging point, get a perfect sight of an alignment and press the trigger straight to the rear. This technique is really good on a hard shot or a long-range target. It takes up about 3/4 of the actual trigger pull, and all you have to do to finish it off and make a real accurate shot. Some revolvers have staging points that are hard to detect, but Ruger double-action revolvers seem to have a very discernible staging point. The Kimber K6S mimics the Ruger with its staging point. Roll back the trigger and a distinct slack in the trigger is felt, and an audible click is heard as the cylinder locks into place. The fact is that you can hold this point for virtually any length of time that you want. The staging point in a double-action revolver, as a comparison, would be similar to that of a compound bow. The initial pull is heavy, and then the bow reaches a point where the pull is extremely light. In summary, for rapid fire, you will want your finger right on the face of the trigger, just using the pad. For slow fire, And for a little bit more accurate shot, you might want to put the finger through just a little bit further and stage it. My trigger finger is set in just before the first joint. A small revolver is not known for accuracy because of the short sight radius. Working the staging point allows you to ensure that the sights are in alignment throughout. That last very short pull of the trigger is performed before the hammer drops. Moving on to the sights, I can only say that they are excellent. Most folks these days favor night sights, and the K6S comes standard with them. The front sight is pinned, while the rear sight is dovetailed into the frame. Again, with the rest of the Revolver, there are no sharp edges on the rear sight. The dot on the front sight is larger than the 2 dots on the rear sight, which makes for a quick sight alignment. The grips are rubber from Crimson Trace. They have some cushion to them, and also a palm swell. One of the first things that I change on a small revolver is the grip, as they are usually too small for my hand, and I struggle to get a revolver in place and hold it there while shooting. The grip of the K6S has a finger groove, which helps to position the hand correctly. The width of the grip is tapered from top to bottom and provides as much rubber to the palm of the shooting hand as possible without going overboard on the grip width. The backstrap is devoid of rubber, but incorporates vertical grooves. The backstrap is such that you can achieve a very high handhold on the grip, which is essential to controlling a small revolver like this. The other beauty of the K6S is the lack of an external hammer that could catch the web of the hand, for some, where that part of the hand is, well, fleshy, like mine. I have found no exercises to firm up that part of the hand. Not having to worry about hammer bite is something I always enjoy. The reach to the trigger is short, as can be expected from a compact revolver. However, the face of the trigger finds itself nicely nestled in the first joint of my trigger finger, right where I like it. The grip is held in place by a single screw and is of the pinky hanger type. Your pinky is going to hang off the grip though, but that's alright because that pinky wraps under the grip nicely. With the pinky finger beneath the grip, the support hand presses that pinky into the grip. The thumb of the support hand comes over top of the shooting hand thumb, and the next thing you know is that you have a very solid grip on a very solid revolver. The grip, as the rest of the K6S, fits and functions perfectly. I felt no need to change the grip until a better grip was found, and one was. I found the Hogue Monogrip Rubber Grip, black Kimber K6S, double action, single action, at the Jungle Store, and it was quickly installed. Although a bit longer than the stock grip, the grip covers the backstrap and also adds a bit more dimension to the grip that my hand likes. The fit of the Hogue grip is not perfect. There is a slight gap at the top of the grip, which the standard grips covered. It's not a deal breaker, as that grip adds some length and girth that my hand likes. The gap is just something that my anal side says shouldn't be there, but I'll get over it. And speaking of gaps, the flash gap, the distance from the cylinder face to the throat of the barrel, the forcing cone, is less than 0.02 of an inch. And because of the recessed cylinder chambers, clearance between the rear of the cylinder and the recoil shield seems just as close as the flash gap. And speaking of the cylinder on the Kimber K6S incorporates flats over flutes in its design. The flats add strength to the cylinder, capable of holding 6 cartridges rather than 5 cartridges, as is common among short-barreled, small-frame revolvers. Unlike the Ruger SP101, the K6S cylinder lockup is in the conventional fashion, at the rear of the cylinder and at the ejection rod, whereas the SP101 is at the rear of the cylinder and at the front of the crane, which attributes to the Ruger's ruggedness. Note that Dan Western revolvers latch at the front of the crane, which contributes to the hardiness of these revolvers. However, that is not to say that lockup on the K6S is weak. Due to the recessed chambers of the K6S, there is very little gap between the base of the cartridges and the recoil shield, which minimizes rearward movement of the cartridges under recoil. Regardless, I don't see running a continuous diet of full-house Magnum ammunition in the K6S revolver being beneficial to the lifespan of the K6S, or any revolver for that matter, or the shooting hand, unless you just particularly enjoy having a flamethrower with a very high energy recoil in your hand. The last item worthy of mention is the angle of the rear of the frame in the hammer area. When you think of hammerless revolvers, which is a misnomer and is actually a shrouded hammer or double action only DAO revolver, you may hearken back to the Smith & Wesson Model 649, or Bodyguard as it came to be known. Taurus made a shrouded hammer revolver as well. Ruger also makes a SP101 shrouded hammer version with its Model 5720. The Smith & Wesson 649 hammer shroud was likened to a hunchback, whereas the hammer shroud on the Ruger SP101 5720 kept the lines of the traditional revolver design. The Kimber K6S, however, broke the mold and is one of the finest examples of ingenuity in streamlining the hammer area. The rear sight blends perfectly into a declining slope at the rear of the revolver's frame, into a sheer vertical wall in which to rest the web of the shooting hand. You could actually fire the K6S with your thumb atop the hammer shroud, and use the tip of your thumb as a pointing device on the backside of the rear sight or just below it. As Dr. Spock would say,
fascinating.
regardless of how a firearm looks or feels, the telling point is how it performs. Watching Hickok 45 shoot the Kimber K6S and hitting the 80-yard gong with it several times told me two things. I am not Wild Bill Hickok, nor am I Hickok 45. My challenge was to simply place bullets on a target at a combat distance of 7 yards with some degree of accuracy. If I were to carry the K6S, I would probably be carrying .38 Special plus P ammunition.
Well, fascinating is a word I use for the unexpected.
While I'm not going to go into detail, I can say that shooting the Kimber K6S was a rewarding experience, in that I learned what not to shoot through this revolver. If I did my part, the K6S did its part, and I was able to keep the majority of rounds within where I aimed at the combat distance of 7 yards, although slightly to the right of point of aim. That could have been me or the sights. Luckily, the rear sight is drift adjustable for windage, and a slight left tap on the rear sight would probably prove beneficial, in my case. For the time being, I am leaving the rear sight where it is, as a slight right impact at combat distance is not going to be a showstopper, and I know how to compensate for it. Recoil is straight back into the hand, with the web of the shooting hand taking the brunt of the recoil. So, here is a brief rundown of the ammunition fired. Shooting the 158 grain semi-wad cutter hollow point ammunition was a breeze. Recoil, while stout, was highly manageable. The 125 grain plus P ammunition was, of course, a little stouter, and after a cylinder full, the shooting glove was put on. I like the nerves in my hand enough to try to protect him as much as possible. Muzzle flash is also greater than with standard loads. The 125 grain 357 Magnum is stouter almost to the point of being extremely abusive to the hand. The flame out of the front of the barrel is impressive, to say the least. Yes, Martha, the 125 grain 357 Magnum ammunition is a heck of a flamethrower out of a 2-inch barreled revolver. With a good grip on the gun, I was able to return the barrel on target pretty quickly, however. My ammunition recommendation for the K6S is the simple, reliable time and performance proven 158 grain semi-wide cutter hollow point. In fact, that is my standard ammunition recommendation for any small frame, short barreled revolver. The bottom line here is that a lot of velocity is going to be lost from standard velocity figures, and with a short barreled revolver, ammunition choices may be critical. Leave the plus P ammunition for the big guns. What little advantage that you gain in velocity with a short barreled revolver shooting plus P ammunition is not worth the price to pay in recoil and reduced control. Just because a handgun is rated for 357 Magnum ammunition does not mean that it is the best cartridge to shoot. A neat little trick that I found while shooting the K6S is that I can place the thumb of my shooting hand on top of the hammer shroud, while using the tip of my thumb as a pointer to align with my target. Although the thumb does cover the rear sight, the thumb also serves as a means to help control muzzle jump, keeping the dangerous end of the firearm pointed in the right direction for quick follow-up shots. The Ruger SP101 357 Magnum in the 2¼ inch barrel configuration is simply just a handy-dandy compact revolver. It looks good, it is a joy to handle, and with better grips and a firm hold on those grips, can be a fairly pleasant shooter, even when full-load 357 Magnum projectiles are passing through its bore. At 26 ounces, that's 1 pound 10 ounces loaded, it is not one of the lightest revolvers, and with only 5 rounds available, it is not a high-capacity firearm. So, what makes it so great? How about sending a federal 125 grain JHP at 1,255 feet per second without so much as a whimper? Or how about lobbing a federal 158 grain Hydroshock JHP downrange at about 1,122 feet per second? Perhaps the Sig Sauer V-Crown 125 grain JHP 38 Special plus P at 900 feet per second, or the Sig Sauer V-Crown 125 grain JHP 357 Magnum at around 1,450 feet per second might be more to your liking. These are my favorite loads for the revolver. The Ruger SP101 can handle these and yell, "Feed me all night long!" Two of the SP101 revolver's greatest attributes is the pinned replaceable black ramp front sight and integral rear sight, and the triple locking cylinder that is locked into the frame at the front, rear, and bottom for more positive alignment and dependable operation. Takedown of integrated subassemblies requires no special tools, allowing for easy maintenance and reassembly. The grip frame easily accommodates a variety of custom grips. And, of course, it is made of stainless steel for corrosion resistance, something that is important to me when living in a southern state. Opening the cylinder takes a simple push of the cylinder release button, rather than a push or pull. Last, but not least, is the fact that this SP101 has double strike or restrike capabilities. Unless all cartridges have been fired, or in the rare case of a misfire, pulling the trigger fires the next live chambered cartridge. At the range, the SP101 proves itself quite capable of 4-inch groups at 7 yards, if you do your part. The further the distance, the worse it gets, at least for me, since a short sight radius hampers long-distance shooting a tad. With a target at 25 yards, I can tell you that I will hit the target. What I cannot tell you is exactly where. Surprisingly, and with a good grip, follow-up shots can be quick, even with 125 grain .357 Magnum ammunition. With the gun being so short, and with a firm grip on the revolver, recoil is straight back into the hand and tends to lift the whole hand, rather than just rotating the gun into hand. Locking out the arms and wrist gets this diminutive revolver back on target faster than you might think possible. For defensive carry, the SP101 is normally loaded with 38 Special Plus P 158 grain LSW CHP, or lead semi-wad cutter hollow point, at 900 feet per second. This has been a standard law enforcement cartridge for many years. For very serious shooting, the 6 Hour V-Crown 125 grain JHP .357 Magnum at around 1450 feet per second seems to have a good accuracy. Muzzle and side flash can be quite impressive from the .357 Magnum load. You don't want your hand anywhere near the flash gap. I use a thumb over grip when I get serious about putting rounds where I want them. With the thumb-wrapped method of holding a revolver, both hands on the butt, the revolver is better stabilized and the support hand is well away from the flash gap. For me, I can apply it regardless of the size of the revolver, small, medium, or family economy size. Felt recoil can be bothersome, although the SP101 weighs more than some other compact revolvers. The felt recoil is sharp in the hand, and I would recommend light target ammunition and .38 Special. For example, a target load of 147 grain round nose or wad cutter for range practice. Even shooting range ammunition can be bothersome to some. At 690 feet per second, 147 grain round nose or wad cutter is a very mild load that will help you concentrate on what needs to be concentrated on and not worry about recoil. Compared to a revolver like the Ruger LCR or a similar lightweight revolver, the felt recoil by the SP101 is a pussycat.